Speaking of housing, we'll go to our next topic. The federal government announced more deals to fund housing construction in Toronto and Calgary today, but absent from those announcements, provincial governments. The finance minister says she'd be happy to have premiers kick in their own funding. Have a look.
I am really pleased to see the premiers paying attention to municipalities. I would love to see them providing even more support to the municipalities over whom they are proudly asserting their jurisdiction.
What are the political optics around these housing announcements? The Power Panel is still with me to discuss this. So, Kate, some criticism from the premiers last week about the Housing Accelerator Fund, saying that they don't like it when Ottawa goes directly to the cities and cuts deals. They don't get to be there when they hand out the cash, and the provinces doesn't get to take any credit for that.
Or assert any control.
And that's the question to you. Do you think that there is a problem with how this is all structured? And do you think that the provinces need to step up? I mean, we spoke to the Calgary mayor earlier in the program, and she said, look, I'm not going to turn down cash from Ottawa. If they're coming with $228 million, I don't care who it comes from, as long as it helps with this crisis. Do you think that the Conservative premiers have misfired here? Like maybe they're just not getting it, that it's a crisis and it doesn't really matter where the cash comes from?
Yeah, no, I think they certainly get it, and we're seeing that play out in Ontario. Doug Ford's entire political legacy is probably going to be determined on the housing file, which is why we're seeing him switch gears on things like Greenbelt and other things. So I think they certainly get it. I do think it is, of course, about control and parameters and playing a bit of a role in who gets what. I also think the provinces are probably a little bit more sensitive to municipal concerns on things like zoning. They're probably hearing about that much more often than necessarily the federal government. I think at the end of the day, though, what we're seeing is a huge injection of cash from the federal government for something that is going to be realized medium to long term. I think, the Liberals are right to focus on housing. I think the way they're going about it is going to benefit the next government and maybe the one after that, not them today. And when it comes to kind of the jurisdictional question, we see a lot of carrot in terms of the federal government's approach. I don't think we're seeing any stick. We don't see the feds really asking municipalities to remove red tape and regulation. We haven't seen any kind of parallel commitment like what Pierre Poilievre has talked about in terms of actually holding cash back if certain housing targets aren't met. So this is a really complex problem. 70,000 units is great. It's not even a drop in the bucket to the 5.3 million we need to sustain the growth the country is having, but it's going to cost $450,000 per unit based on the calculation today, which is a lot of dough for very limited short-term political gain for this government.
Yeah, so the Freeland announcement in Toronto today, as you were just saying there, Kate, $1.2 billion in loans. They are repayable low-interest loans to folks that are building these units. And they're going to get 2,644 rental homes across 7 projects. So it's a lot of money for not that many units, but I guess that's just the cost of doing business now in Canada. Françoise, what do you make of this? I mean, the CMHC, the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, says they need to build 3.5 million units by 2030. We only build about 260,000 a year. So we really have to turbocharge the amount of homes that we're building. It's a huge political problem, especially among millennials. Young people really care about this. The largest voter bloc. The government's trying to be attentive to it. How do you see this housing file play out?
Well, I see it as a big, right now, the same way we said in the first block that the Liberals were really bad at communicating what they were trying to do with their carbon tax. Now, all we'll see is them going to announce in as many municipalities that will welcome them with open arms and with a check. And that makes for good TV, because I saw Minister Fraser today, I saw Chrystia Freeland today. And that's just a few examples. Is it good for the country? Is it good for the housing crisis? I do not think so. The ex-law student in me went back to my books, because I'm like, my God, when I was a politician and I was in the House of Commons, I would have dreamed to go do some announcement directly with my municipality of Gatineau. But we were forbidden because municipalities, according to my law books, falls under provincial total exclusive jurisdiction. So it's going to be a battle, but the feds are betting that it looks bad to go battle jurisdiction when people need a home, need a roof on top of their head. But this is a dangerous, dangerous play. Just to be able to go in certain ridings that you want to keep from here to the election, I think it's a dangerous game, and they might see province answering, doing what Quebec has been doing all along, because we do not have those problems in Quebec, because we said, no, you want to come and spend in our province? Well, you make some deals with the province. And for those who say, well, it takes time for the federal to negotiate with the provinces, just imagine, Ontario has 444 municipalities. Good luck dealing with 400 and maybe 40 left to negotiate with. And in other provinces, it's even more than that. So it's like, seriously, I think it's just for optic. And I find it sad that we play optic political game with a subject that is so serious as the housing crisis in Canada.
I was at the cabinet retreat in Charlottetown, PEI, just before this session of Parliament returned, and the government was there meeting, trying to discuss what the housing agenda would be for the fall, cognizant of the fact that it was a big issue among young people and in the polls. And we were quite critical of them at the time that they didn't have anything to announce. There was no real plan. There was nothing like enunciated from that cabinet retreat that was supposed to be about housing. We're like, okay, where's the beef? But at least now I guess we're seeing the beef, right? We are seeing the Housing Accelerator Fund roll out. Sean Fraser is racking up the Aeroplan points, flying across the country, announcing new deals seemingly every day with different municipalities, and he's getting units built. I mean, that's what people were clamoring for, right? People want to see homes built, and he is having some success. Shachi, do you think that that is going to help them in the standings with millennials and young voters who really, I don't know what the latest numbers are, but I know historically over the last few months, this has been at the top of the list of priorities for them?
It continues to be a top priority. It continues to be a top priority for two reasons. One, because mortgage rates are as high as they are, and so the dream of owning a home becomes that much more distant. And also the rental factor and how rents really, that the rental equation of this has skyrocketed. A couple of points. First of all, I started to smile when Françoise was talking because, you know, it's almost as though we're all realizing it's like that scene in Casablanca where the police inspector Louis, who's played by Claude Rains, comes in, raids the casinos. I'm shocked to discover gambling. Are we shocked to discover that now some of these announcements are rolling out in what are very obviously swing ridings and in cities and urban areas that are in play? Of course that's happening. What else do we expect is going to happen at this stage? But you said something a moment ago, JP, about getting units built. What we're hearing and what we're seeing from the federal government, from this level of politician at this federal level, are announcements aimed at spending some money, aimed at eventually getting some units built. And there are so many steps in between. And I say this to you as somebody living in Metro Vancouver, speaking to you from Vancouver, where people have been clamoring for more supply and greater affordability and relief for the better part of a decade. We've been the canary in the coal mine, and guess what? It remains a crisis. So dropping in from riding to riding and swing region to swing region and battleground to battleground with some checks, yes, it helps the optics and the visibility, and I'm not going to dunk on the communications of that. But frankly, housing has not been a winning file for this government, in part because we've heard the Prime Minister say in the past it's not primarily a federal responsibility. And now realizing and once again playing defense because you've got an opposition leader who is playing on the fact that people are not necessarily experts in jurisdictional law, saying, well, what are you guys doing on this front? So it's defensive. It's also, as Kate mentioned, the payoff comes years from now. But in the meantime, it's like, here's a chocolate, release some endorphins. Please just stop beating us up on so many different files.
Stevie, I think that Shachi makes a good point there, that the Prime Minister got in trouble for saying, well, it's primarily a provincial responsibility. You know, like he wasn't necessarily saying that. He said that they would step up, they would be there, they would help, but he did kind of make that definitive statement that it maybe is more of a provincial problem. Now they're just throwing that out the window, right? Now they're like, let's just cut deals with the cities directly. I want to be there. I want Sean Fraser to be in Calgary with that big check, and we're going to announce all these units. Like, they've just gone the opposite direction, right? Realizing that when it comes to politics, you might as well just do it, right? You might as well just sign these deals. Forget about the constitutional considerations. Poilievre's up 20 points among millennials. You know, we got to do something. Is that a fair read of how this is playing out?
I don't think it's pure politics. I think a crisis is a crisis, and it's a top issue, and they heard over the summer, and they've been hearing from caucus, and they've been hearing from Canadians that this is where they want their government to focus. They've even been hearing from the opposition leader that this is where they want the government to focus, so that is where they are putting their focus. And as you said, Sean Fraser has been on fire since the shuffle. It feels like there's an announcement every week. And we've, like I said earlier, the Fez is next week, and I think we largely anticipate seeing more housing-related announcements coming out of that. My only concern is that we may be losing the forest for the trees here a little bit. And there's a danger of oversaturating the voters with these housing announcements to the point where they start tuning them out, and there aren't those economic action plan signs up to remind them.
Kate, really quick final word to you. Where do you think this goes? Do you think the Feds will have a bunch of cash to splash around on housing?
Yeah, I think that's really the only place they seem to be putting cash lately. Certainly would expect that to be the core focus, but again, it's not. You can't really buy your way out of the housing crisis. It's tied to so many things. It's tied to immigration, which finally just now the government is deciding they need to link infrastructure support to, and that includes housing, and it's tied to labor shortages. So more money for the Housing Accelerator Fund or the Rental Construction Financing Initiative, all well and good. Not going to fix the housing crisis tomorrow, and it doesn't get at some of those more systemic challenges to do with population growth, to do with labor market shortages. That really needs to be addressed in order to have any kind of a short-term impact.
And it'll be hard for builders to build in this interest rate environment, no matter what the government does. So that is a real concern. Okay, thank you to the Power Panel, Stevie O'Brien, Kate Harrison, Françoise Boivin, and Shachi Curl. You guys were great. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.